Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Logan always had difficulty pinpointing the exact moment when things changed. He noticed the aftermath, but never the during. It was as if the world collapsed in silence, and he only became aware of the rubble when he was already on his knees in the middle of it. On that Friday night, everything seemed normal. Chloe, excited, was looking for her purse while talking about reuniting with her college friends. She fixed her hair in front of the living room mirror and smiled with that air of someone who already knew the answer before even asking if he minded. Logan responded with a kiss on the cheek, an automatic, routine gesture, unaware that he was saying goodbye to something much bigger than just that night. She left with the promise that she'd be back early, that it would just be dinner, some laughs, a bit of nostalgia with those who shared years of their youth. Logan stayed home, prepared something light to eat, sat on the couch with a glass of wine, and tried to relax. He put on a movie she didn't like to enjoy the temporary peace, and for a while, he managed to unwind. But as the hours passed, the calm began to turn into restlessness. It was almost 1 a.m. when he started checking his phone more frequently. The messages he sent went unanswered. He called twice and got voicemail both times. He thought of 1,000 explanations: dead battery, no signal, conversations that dragged on too long. Still, the unease grew in his stomach like a stone that wouldn't go down. At 2:37 a.m., the door opened. The sound of keys being fumbled with hurriedly, the thud of her purse hitting the wall, and uncoordinated steps in the hallway announced Chloe's arrival. Logan stood up immediately. She walked in and tried to smile, but the smile didn't last. Her dress was torn at the side seam, a detail that couldn't be easily explained away. She was barefoot, holding her shoes in her hand, her feet dirty as if she'd walked along the street for a long time. Her hair, which had been neatly tied in an elegant bun, now hung disheveled over her shoulders. The smudged lipstick at the corners of her mouth and the black streaks of mascara under her eyes completed the image of someone who had been through much more than just a night out with friends. She said something brief, something like, "It was fun," or, "Sorry for the hour," but Logan barely registered the words. What caught his attention was the scent. A strong, nauseating smell, different from what Chloe usually wore. It wasn't hers. And that was enough for everything inside him to start shifting silently. When she tried to go upstairs, he extended his hand to help her, and she accepted with a tired smile. During the climb, Chloe stumbled twice. The last time, she leaned her face against Logan's shoulder and mumbled something he couldn't understand. Confused words, spoken with the heavy tongue of someone who drank too much or hid too much. He didn't push. He just helped her to the bedroom. Chloe lay down still dressed, the zipper crooked on her back and her knees scraped. Within seconds, she was asleep. Logan stood still for several minutes, observing the woman he had known for nearly a decade, who tonight seemed like a complete stranger. The silence in the room felt deafening. Every detail, the torn dress, the dirty shoes, the unfamiliar perfume, added up in his head like pieces of a puzzle he didn't want to assemble but that was forming itself anyway. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring into space. He wondered if this was just a misinterpretation, if he was overreacting because of the late hour, the lack of response, the delay. But deep down, something told him it wasn't exaggeration, it was instinct. The next morning, she woke up with a headache and asked for coffee. She acted with a certain normalcy, as if she were just returning from a fun event. When Logan mentioned the time she came home, she said she lost track of time because one of her friends got sick, so they took longer than expected. The torn dress? She tripped getting out of the taxi. The scraped knees? She tried to get out of the car too quickly. The perfume? Probably one of her friends since they were hugging all night. Logan listened calmly. Each explanation sounded like a rehearsed piece of theater, poorly performed. Convincing enough to avoid an immediate argument, but dubious enough to plant a storm. That night, Logan had trouble sleeping. He relived her gestures, her looks, the tone of her voice. He tried to remember the last time they laughed together genuinely. When did they stop listening to each other? When did they start just coexisting instead of truly living together? He remembered their wedding day, the promises made in front of everyone, and how much he believed in each one of them. Suspicion settled in subtly but relentlessly. And the worst part of all was the lack of evidence. There were only feelings. And nobody would believe a man who says something is wrong because he smelled a perfume that wasn't his wife's. Still, Logan noted the time she came home. He mentally recorded the clothes she wore, the excuses she gave. He stored everything. Because deep down, he knew. That Friday was the first visible crack. And although he didn't yet have all the answers, he already felt that something much bigger than he could control had begun to crumble. And once you hear the foundation creak, it's impossible to ignore that the ground is about to give way. The days that followed were a constant mix of observation and silence. Logan started living with attentive eyes, searching for traces in every corner of the house, not for concrete evidence, but to confirm what his instincts had been shouting since that early morning. Chloe continued her routine, smiling in the mornings, talking about work, asking if he needed anything from the market. But there was something in her tone that sounded rehearsed. A kind of lightness that felt forced, like someone who needs to appear calm because they're carrying a secret that trembles within. Logan noticed she avoided any conversation that required depth. When he asked something personal, she quickly changed the subject, pulled out her phone, or mentioned needing to handle something urgent. A pattern began to emerge. Whenever he approached unexpectedly, she quickly shoved her phone into her pocket. Her responses to texts seemed mechanical, always accompanied by a slight smile, but the content was never shared. Before, Chloe used to show memes, cat videos, inside jokes with her friends. Now, the screen was a kind of fortress between them. One morning, while Chloe was taking a shower, Logan saw her favorite necklace hanging on the doorknob of the bedroom door. It was broken, the chain tangled, as if it had been ripped off in a hurry. She hadn't mentioned it. No comment about losing it or breaking it. It was as if she were pretending it was still intact. He picked up the necklace, placed it on her dresser, and waited for some kind of reaction. But Chloe ignored it for 2 days, as if pretending it wasn't there erased the incident. Logan felt his heart tighten at the sight. A woman who once valued small details now pretended this meant nothing at all. That same week, he came home and noticed the dress she wore the night everything began was hanging on a hanger, as if it had been washed and put away hastily. Upon closer inspection, he saw the tear had been sewn up in an improvised way, with thread of a different color. This wasn't something Chloe would overlook. It confirmed something, she still clung to that night for some reason. Instead of getting rid of the dress, she decided to fix it. And that gesture alone said more than any words. In an attempt to maintain a normal appearance, Chloe started insisting on small outings together. She suggested brunch on Sunday, mentioning they needed to reconnect. But every time Logan agreed, he felt she was trying to balance two worlds. During one conversation over coffee, she commented that a college friend of hers was going through a divorce. She said her husband was paranoid, thought he was being cheated on, and started monitoring everything she did. Chloe laughed at the situation, but Logan understood it as an indirect message. It was as if she were saying, "Be careful not to end up like him." That remark hit him like a disguised punch. Logan didn't respond. He just observed. He began coming home from work at different times without warning, trying to catch her off guard. And one afternoon, chance was merciless. He arrived early, planning to rest before an important meeting later that night. As he entered, he noticed the bedroom door was slightly open, and the sound of a familiar female laugh escaped amid a muffled conversation. They were familiar laughs. But a name whispered softly made him freeze, Adam. He didn't recognize the voice on the other end, but it was clear someone was on the line. Chloe was speaking softly, sitting on the edge of the bed with the phone pressed to her ear, legs crossed, staring at the wall. She said that night was perfect, that she couldn't stop thinking about him, and that Logan was, as always, too distracted to notice anything. Logan felt his stomach churn. The same sensation he had in the early morning when she returned with her shoes in hand came rushing back, as if the past were pulling him into a hole he had tried to ignore for too long. He retreated slowly, left the house without making a sound. He went to his car and took a deep breath. He had just heard confirmation. A name. A scene described by her. A tone of voice that carried no guilt, no hesitation. It was desire, it was surrender. Chloe hadn't just betrayed him. She was still involved, emotionally and physically. She spoke of this man as someone who was already part of her routine. Logan sat in his car for 40 minutes, not touching anything, not calling anyone. He stared blankly at nothing, trying to understand how the woman he loved, with whom he shared plans, laughter, debts, and victories, could betray him so calmly. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself, but the realization that Chloe showed no remorse. No sign of doubt, no anguish, no guilt. She seemed frustrated that Logan still existed there as an obstacle. As if he were an inconvenient detail in a story she had rewritten alone. Logan realized at that moment that her version was a performance, and he was merely an extra. The true narrative unfolded outside the house, in deleted messages, hidden kisses, quick meetings that left too many traces for anyone willing to see. That night, he said nothing. He lay beside her, who pretended to be too tired to talk. Logan closed his eyes and pretended to sleep too. But inside, something had changed definitively. The man who once questioned whether he was overreacting now saw with frightening clarity. From then on, he began planning the next steps. Because if there was one thing Logan wasn't, it was naive enough to continue being a spectator of his own humiliation. Logan spent the weekend submerged in silence. He didn't say anything to anyone, didn't seek advice, didn't allow himself the relief of words. He carried within himself a storm so contained that he wasn't sure how he maintained control. But he knew what he had to do. There was a name. Adam. And behind every name lies a story, a life, a past. Logan was determined to uncover everything he could about this man. It was no longer just intuition or suspicion. He had heard words from Chloe's lips that tore through his chest like glass, and the only thing he could do was transform that pain into clarity. He started with a simple online search. Social media, tagged photos, mentions in groups, company pages. In no time, he found a profile with the full name, Adam Whitaker. Married, father of 2, creative manager at a design agency less than 15 minutes from where Chloe worked. The pieces began to fit together. He analyzed every post. Pictures with his wife, Grace, smiling next to their young kids, family vacations, dinners on special occasions. And the cruelest part of all, in the weeks when Chloe seemed strange, Adam appeared even more dedicated to portraying himself as the perfect husband. This deeply unsettled Logan. Because it wasn't just a betrayal between 2 adults. 2 entire families were being deceived, 2 lives manipulated while the lovers played out their parallel reality. Logan began following Adam's steps online. He watched when he posted, where he checked in, the places he frequented. In less than 3 days, he knew where he ate lunch on Tuesdays, where he ran on Saturdays, which gym he attended. But Logan didn't want confrontation. Not yet. He wanted to see. He wanted to witness with his own eyes the truth he already knew but that still bled inside him as if it were still a doubt. On Thursday evening, Chloe left home saying she had a happy hour with the team, common among marketing colleagues, especially on the last Thursday of the month. Logan, with the calmness of someone who had already made his decision, said it was fine. Pretended to be busy with an important project, wished her a good night, and watched her leave wearing the same dress that months earlier had come back torn. This time, the shoes were spotless, her hair carefully tied, makeup light but deliberate. She dressed differently when it was for him, Logan. But with Adam, there was a sparkle in her eyes she no longer knew how to hide. Logan waited about 15 minutes and then left. He already knew the destination. A discreet bar downtown, far from the city's bustling circuit, a place with dim lighting and music loud enough to muffle conversations but without the chaos of noise. He parked across the street and stayed in his car. He watched. His heart raced with anticipation. Part of him hoped he was wrong. He hoped Chloe had changed her mind. That she had gone to meet her friends for real. That somehow, that name spoken on the phone was a mistake, a cruel coincidence. But at 8:17 p.m., he saw Adam arrive. Adam came alone, wearing a rolled-up shirt, exuding a cynical confidence in his stride. He greeted the waiter with familiarity. Logan immediately recognized the feeling that this wasn't a first time. It was routine. And 5 minutes later, Chloe appeared. She arrived smiling, walking quickly, glancing around as if afraid of being seen. They met on the sidewalk. Adam pulled her by the waist and kissed her right there, in the middle of the street, as if they owned the world. Chloe returned the kiss and laughed, saying something Logan couldn't hear, but that certainly no longer mattered. What was in front of him was enough to erase any lingering doubts. Logan grabbed his phone and started taking pictures. Every gesture, every approach, every detail. His hands trembled. His palms sweated, his eyes watered, but he kept the camera steady. This wasn't revenge. It was emotional justice. It was a way of telling himself he wasn't crazy, that his heart hadn't lied, that this pain had form, had a face, had a name. He spent another 20 minutes watching the couple. They entered the bar arm in arm, exchanged complicit glances, sat at an isolated table close enough for their knees to touch. Chloe, who once promised to love only Logan, now smiled like a teenage girl in love with another man. Back in the car, Logan put the phone in his pocket and just breathed. He knew what he would do next. But at that moment, all he could feel was a cruel mix of relief and devastation. He had the proof. He had the certainty. He had everything he needed to finally free himself from a relationship that, though still standing, had collapsed internally long ago. He drove home with a dangerous calm. There was no rush. It was as if every second was necessary to drain the anger and transform the pain into resolve. When Chloe returned, almost 3 hours later, her lipstick was retouched, her hair tied more casually, and her smile forced. She said the night was long, that the girls were energetic, that she lost track of time. Logan listened to everything in silence, without interrupting. He waited for her to finish. Then he stood up, opened the photo gallery on his phone, and handed it to her. The images were there. Clear. Cruel. Impossible to deny. Chloe froze. She looked at each photo as if watching her life being erased, scene by scene. Her voice faltered when she tried to say something. But Logan was direct. He said he knew everything, that there was nothing left to explain. He informed her he had already started the divorce process and that she needed to leave the house. He didn't shout, didn't beg for explanations. He simply left the room, leaving behind a woman he had once believed he knew. Chloe sat, unsure what to do. And Logan, for the first time in months, felt something close to freedom. It hurt. But it hurt differently. Like someone finally able to breathe after being submerged for too long. Chloe left that same night, carrying 2 poorly packed suitcases, her pale face and the expression of someone trying to figure out where she lost control of her own lie. She didn't cry. She didn't ask to stay either. She just left. Maybe she knew everything had gone too far. Maybe she believed she could still fix it later, with time, messages, promises. But Logan no longer offered time. Nor did he believe in empty promises. As soon as the door closed, he locked it. Not to protect the house, but to seal the final passage to a past that would never be allowed to return. The next morning, he woke up earlier than usual, feeling as if he had stayed awake all night despite having slept. His body felt heavy as if he had carried a world on his shoulders, but curiously, his mind felt light. As if a battlefield had finally been cleared. The divorce petition, initiated days earlier, was now advancing quickly. They had no children, no contested assets, no sentimental ties that justified even one more second of coexistence. The end seemed clear. And Logan was ready to face whatever came next. At the same time, something inside him said this couldn't end like this. Adam was still living his own lie. Grace, his wife, still believed she was in a stable marriage. And Logan knew, with all the evidence in hand, that he had the power to change that. He thought about it for a few hours. Then he wrote a simple, direct message and attached all the photos. He typed Grace's number, found on a mutual friend's profile, and sent it. There was no hate. It was justice. It was as if he were saying, "You deserve to know who shares your bed." There was no immediate reply. But 2 days later, the news arrived. Grace, devastated, filed for separation. Adam was kicked out of the house and, according to a coworker of Chloe's, was trying to hide the scandal from the company, fearing it would damage his professional image. And it did. Logan didn't smile upon hearing this. He didn't celebrate. He simply felt that everything was finally falling into place. The emotional destruction that began in silence was now making noise elsewhere. And he was no longer the only one carrying open wounds. As the divorce process advanced, Chloe sent messages every day. Some were long, filled with justifications. Others were short, simply saying she missed him. Some came late at night, others during work hours. Logan read each one but didn't reply. It was like watching someone drown in a sea they themselves dug. Her words shifted tone over the weeks. They started begging for forgiveness, then turned to threats of nostalgia, and later became wistful. "Remember our first Christmas together? Do you still listen to that song that played in our car? If I could go back to that night and choose again, I'd choose to stay with you." But Logan had already understood that regret isn't always synonymous with love. Sometimes, it's just consequence. And Chloe wasn't crying over the end. She cried over the consequences. She didn't miss Logan. She missed who she was with him, the stability he offered, the calm that had now been replaced by chaos. Adam, contrary to what she imagined, wanted nothing more than the hidden encounters. When everything came to light, he backed off, stopped responding, disappeared from social media, and acted as if it had all been a fleeting mistake. Chloe was left alone. And as time passed, the messages dwindled, the voice notes ceased, and the attempts at reconciliation turned to dust. Logan dove into himself. He returned to the neighborhood gym, resumed forgotten hobbies like playing guitar and cooking dishes he learned from his grandmother. He started visiting friends he had neglected and traveled to places he always wanted to visit but that once seemed inconvenient for the couple. He rediscovered silence without feeling like someone was missing. He learned to eat lunch alone without it meaning loneliness. He slept with the door open, woke up without rushing, laughed without worrying about judgment from someone beside him. Chloe's absence stopped being a void and became space. Space he now filled with parts of himself that had been buried for years. On one of his trips to the California coast, he met a woman named Kate, a single mother of a 6-year-old girl, who had also gone through a complicated divorce. They talked for hours about loss, new beginnings, and what it means to rebuild yourself after everything collapses. There was no romance. Just connection. And in that brief encounter, Logan realized the world was still full of whole people, who carry scars with dignity and who understand the value of loyalty because they've experienced the weight of betrayal. Kate said something that night he would never forget: some people only learn what love is when they lose someone who truly knew how to love. And Logan, for the first time, understood that Chloe's mistake wasn't getting involved with Adam. Her mistake was underestimating the kind of love she had at home. The loyalty built day by day. The care in small things. The trust that can't be bought or asked for but cultivated. Chloe destroyed all that with a kiss on the sidewalk outside a bar. And now she lived among the ruins of what she herself broke. Logan returned home different. Not with anger, but with a calm certainty of someone who survived an internal fire and, even in ashes, knew how to breathe. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. The pain he felt was invisible, but the man who emerged from it was more whole than before. And perhaps, stronger too. Time passed like a strange tide, calm on the surface but carrying away pieces of what once was underneath. Logan relearned to live little by little, with quiet steps, like someone still testing the ground after falling without warning. He no longer thought about Chloe all the time, but sometimes she came back, not as longing, but as a reminder. A reminder of what he tolerated in the name of a love that, he now understood, was only his. And one day, that reminder returned unexpectedly, with a name he never imagined seeing blinking on his phone screen, Adam. It was an unknown number, but the name in the first line of the message was enough for Logan to know who it was. Adam wanted to talk. He said it wasn't an attempt at reconciliation or justification, but that he needed to clarify some things. Logan hesitated. Why listen to someone who was part of what nearly destroyed him? But for some reason he couldn't explain, he replied only with a, where and when? Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was a part of him still seeking to understand the absurd. They agreed to meet at a neutral, discreet cafe where no one knew them. Adam seemed different. The arrogant posture had been replaced by a weary expression. His shoulders slumped, his eyes sunken, his voice low. He ordered a coffee without sugar and sat in silence for a few seconds before starting to speak. He said Grace had moved away with the kids to another city, that now he only saw them every 2 weeks. He mentioned work had become a burden, that some clients avoided him after the story leaked, and that colleagues no longer treated him the same way. Logan listened in silence. Up to that point, nothing sounded different from what he had already imagined. But what came next was the real punch. Adam said that in recent months, Chloe had been insisting on restarting their relationship. That she called frequently, showed up at places where he was, and said she had been emotionally betrayed by Logan and now just wanted to be happy without guilt. But he, Adam, no longer saw any excitement in it. He said the thrill disappeared as soon as the forbidden aspect was gone. And over time, he started noticing that Chloe was a different version of herself every week. One day sweet, the next controlling. One day passionate, the next cold. And even after everything ended, she still tried to manipulate the narrative. Only now, without anyone to hold her back, the exaggerations became clearer. What left Logan completely still was the next revelation. Adam confessed that weeks before the divorce, he discovered messages from Chloe with another man. Someone named Brian. She said she was tired of waiting for Adam, that she deserved to be loved as a woman and not as a second choice. The most absurd part was that the messages were dated from a time when she was still sleeping in the same bed as Logan. The affair with Adam wasn't the first. And probably not the last. Logan absorbed each word like hearing the echo of an earthquake that had already passed but still shook everything inside him. Adam concluded by saying he was leaving town, trying to start over somewhere else. He apologized, but Logan simply thanked him for the information. He no longer saw Adam as an enemy but as part of a misaligned mechanism that destroyed more lives than he himself realized. Alone at the table, Logan took a deep breath. He picked up his phone, opened the last unread message from Chloe, sent days ago. She had written, "If there's still any chance, tell me." And he typed only, "There was, until I found out you never belonged to anyone. And that I was never your harbor. I was just another boat docked in your storm." He deleted the number afterward, without hesitation. As he left the cafe, he passed an elderly man selling used books at a makeshift stand. Among the covers stained by time, a highlighted phrase caught his attention: "True love never deceives. It reveals." Logan paused for a moment, staring at the phrase as if finally understanding the last piece of an ancient puzzle. He didn't buy the book. He just kept the phrase inside him. Driving home, he felt something different. For the first time, everything made sense. The questions had been answered, the trails connected, the masks removed. Chloe, in her haste to fill voids, had left behind shattered people. And Logan, with his patience in piecing together the fragments, found his own reflection intact, albeit scratched. He spent the following months away from any relationship. He chose to heal from within before allowing another presence beside him. He found beauty in being alone. He met new people, reconnected with old friends, took small trips to places that would never be honeymoon destinations but served perfectly for someone who just needed to breathe clean air. Life went on, as it always does. But what remained was the hardest and most valuable lesson of all: those who lie about love are capable of lying about anything. And the worst prison is staying with someone who pretends to be with you while dreaming of being somewhere else. Logan learned this the bitterest way possible. But he learned. And it was this pain that transformed him. Not into someone distrustful, but into someone who now knows exactly what he deserves. Someone who doesn't settle for crumbs where he once offered banquets. Someone who, instead of begging for love, chooses his own peace. And ultimately understands that sometimes, the happy ending doesn't come with reunion. It comes with silence. With dignity. And with the freedom to never return to what once almost destroyed him. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.